Thank you very much to English Australia for the opportunity to talk about something that I've been tinkering with for a little while now. So today I'm going to talk about grammar through listening and how we can generate grammar interpretation tasks quite quickly with a tool that I've been putting together. I'd like to start with a little question. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey before we look at that tool. So I'm going to get you to listen to this and just tell me, does this sound familiar to you, this kind of interaction?
I
Okay.
think it
Hopefully,
sounds not plain.
oh, the sound didn't play.
Yeah.
Okay, let
Have you
me
have you have you
reshare my.
shared yours? I thought it was only my
Oh,
answer.
okay.
Yeah. Let's try
I
again.
was worried that might happen. I'll click the share sound again, and we'll start again from there. Sorry about that, everyone.
I was thinking
Um,
maybe it's silence from our students. That's what we're
oh,
expecting.
yeah,
Yeah.
always fun.
Quite familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Let's try that again. Let me know if this is coming.
So, where do you live now,
Yeah,
mate?
yeah.
I lived in Blackwood for 6 months.
Oh, you lived there. So, you don't live
Oops.
in Blackwood anymore? Where do you live now?
No, I live there now. Blackwood.
Oh, so you have lived there for 6 months.
Yes, I lived there for 6 months with 2 housemates.
Okay, that might sound a little bit familiar. There's a few things happening there. Firstly,
So,
oops.
where do you live now, mate?
Oh, playing again. The student is very focused on meaning in this interaction. And they are ultimately successful in communicating meaning, but needed a lot of help from the listener. And the teacher's form prompts were unsuccessful. So this kind of thing, I feel happens quite a lot. I'll try to interject or intervene with a little form prompt, and it doesn't really happen as I'd like it to. The student continues to make that kind of error. So today I'm going to look at that kind of issue a little bit and how it sort of led me to creating a tool focusing on grammar interpretation tasks. Before that, I'd like to talk a bit about form and meaning and this idea of noticing. And then finally, at the end of the talk, I'll demonstrate what the tool can do and its limitations. I might talk about a bit as well. So as teachers, we are often sort of straddling that fine line, that balance between form and meaning. In ELICOS in particular, you know, we want our classes to be communicative. We want our students to be talking as much as possible. So interrupting them with these form prompts and things like that sometimes feels counterintuitive. But at the same time, we run into issues where our students aren't able to produce the language accurately enough, and that can affect the meaning of what they're saying as well. And we want them to notice that. So maybe we do controlled practice activities. I've just made this with ChatGPT, but it probably looks quite familiar. A very heavy form focus activity with some past simple and some present perfect there. And maybe we follow that up with a more communicative task where we kind of hope that they then take those lessons on board and those ideas on board and that language on board and start to use it more or notice it in a text a bit more than they did before. But still form and meaning are somewhat separate in that kind of lesson. So another sort of question, have you ever had an experience of being taught a new word or a structure in another language and suddenly noticing it everywhere? I think a lot of us probably have. So I was looking at this model from Woodward that was very kindly shared with me by my supervisor, Chris, here at the ELC, of noticing, where students need to notice language being used naturally and to notice the gap between their own use and natural production. And it sort of follows this cycle potentially of being exposed, maybe in our lessons or maybe, you know, naturally out and about. And then noticing a grammar item or a piece of vocabulary or something like that, or a way to pronounce something, them starting to remember and internalize that, and then start to use it. And then from feedback or even reflection or self-correction, through noticing, they can refine that and remember and internalize and continue. And as teachers, we are sort of putting ourselves in at many of these stages to try to help this process happen. But still, I kind of asked this question of, can we improve their capacity to notice the connection between form and meaning, particularly when listening? So that became my goal, to include tasks in my lessons designed to help students notice the connection between form and meaning, rather than practicing form in isolation and then following this with communicative tasks afterwards. So these tasks, you're probably quite familiar with grammar interpretation tasks, or you might hear them called just interpretation tasks or language interpretation tasks. These are the kinds of tasks that I was quite interested in here and trying to put more of them in my lessons. I also had some feedback, and across our centre, like all centres, we get lots of feedback from our students, and our LACOS students often note that listening practice is underrepresented in our programs. When they do listening, it's often sort of long form listening and note taking, but they have asked for sort of more integration of focused listening tasks or exercises, and those that align with academic lecture formats or real world contexts. And a couple of comments that I collected were, I want to improve my listening and be more sensitive about grammar mistakes. Listening needs to improve. Lectures are difficult for me to listen to. Another thing I've observed is that, just as a rule, grammar teaching is generally happening through writing and reading activities, maybe some speaking, but not so much through listening. There's not that many examples where students are having to notice a grammar item in a listening task. It tends to be very vocabulary focused, comprehension of vocabulary when we are doing listening. So that was something that I wanted to work on, and I sort of developed this hypothesis of putting grammar interpretation tasks and listening practice together to hopefully improve the capacity to notice the connection between form and meaning, and then my students can refine their own language production, hopefully from there. So that was my ultimate goal. So here's an example of that. This comes from actually a task that was in Uncovering Grammar by Thornbury. So the task is, which friends are still on holiday and which ones are already back home? So you're going to hear from Stan, Ellie, Andy, Lorenzo, and Finn. I've adapted this a bit and added the voices using 11 labs. So we'll listen along, and if you'd like to, maybe you can try to attempt the task in chat or in your head. Here we go.
You have 5 new messages. Message 1.
Hey Tim, Stan here. How is everything with you? Great holiday. We've been to the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower, but we haven't been to Versailles yet. We'll phone you back later. Bye.
Message 2.
Hey, Tim, it's Ellie. You must be busy right now. The holiday was great. We went everywhere. Rome, Naples, Florence. I ate so much great Italian food, and the gondola ride in Venice was so romantic. Call me back when you can.
Message 3.
Hi, Tim. It's Andy. I've been meaning to call you all week to tell you about my travels. I went sightseeing and shopping at Harrods. I didn't have time to see Big Ben, but I did buy you a fab t-shirt. I'll call back later.
Message 4.
Tim, baby! Lorenzo here. Amazing holiday. Times Square, the Statue of Liberty, I've done it all. I've met some really cool people and a few pretty ladies. I'm a bit low money though. Oops, gotta go.
Message 5.
Tim, buddy, it's your old pal Finn. Just phoning to tell you about the trip. I had a great time. I walked along the Great Wall and tried some amazing dumplings. I didn't have time to see the Forbidden City though. I've got some great photos to show you. Talk soon.
End of messages. Press 1 to listen again. Press 2 to delete your messages.
Okay, so I'm not going to go through the answers just because of time, but I thought I'd just sort of mention that this task is very much designed to make sure the students are noticing that connection between form and meaning. And maybe the student in my initial example, right at the start of my presentation, hadn't sort of noticed the importance of that as much, whereas this task really draws attention to that in order to complete it. And it is, sort of by necessity a listening task. You need to listen carefully to answer these questions. You also might notice the sort of the versatility of using 11 labs. I had lots of different accents there, little vocal inflections and chuckles and things like that, which we'll have a quick look at a bit later.
You have.
So this task does all the things. It requires noticing the difference in form to comprehend the meaning, and it highlights the importance of form. It demonstrates natural in-context usage of the target grammar form, or the target grammar forms. It practices listening, which was what my students wanted more of. But the big downfall of these, and probably why they aren't something that we as teachers tend to produce that much, or at least a lot of us don't, or when we look at textbooks or workbooks, I feel like they're underrepresented, is because they are time consuming to create. So that became my next goal, to create a custom GPT to create seminar or lecture style listening scripts with grammar interpretation style tasks attached to them, and then generating voices for these scripts with 11 labs for use in my classes. So let's have a look at that quickly. So I've made a little video here. So here's my tool, language interpretation listening generator, which I'll share in chat a little bit later. We start by pushing the button in the middle, choose a language item. So this is a custom GPT through ChatGPT that I put together. So it starts with a list of possible grammar items or language items that you could choose from. These are ones that I've selected that might lend themselves more to this kind of task. Some grammar items aren't so effective, but you can type your own, but I think the results tend to vary a bit more wildly there. So I'm going to select number 4, conditional comparison. My custom GPT then asks me for a little bit more information. So which conditional type would you like to focus on? I chose second and third. And then it asked me for an academic topic. So something that I can choose from a list. I can ask it to choose. And actually, generally, this is what it's quite good at, or one of the things it's quite good at is choosing an appropriate topic to match with that grammar item. So it's chosen technology from the list. And then after that, it asks whether I want a script for a lecture with just one voice or a seminar discussion. Again, trying to prepare my students for what the kind of listening they'll be doing at university. And once that's done, we get a script. And if we sort of stop there, we can see in that script, there are lots of examples, lots of really good examples of the 2 grammar items, the second and third conditional that I'd asked for. And then it will immediately follow up with a language interpretation task. This is where it tends to struggle a little bit, but we'll have a look at what it makes. So it's come up with, a bit slow here. Oh, there we go. There we go. So listen carefully to the speakers, decide which areas are imagining a different present or future or imagining a different past. Label each item under A or B, and we have got some general topics there. One of the things that does tend to happen that you might need to guide it through a little bit is that it will give like complete sentences, which means that the activity could just happen as a reading task without the listening. So it sometimes needs to be guided away from that. I've tried very hard to stop it doing that, but it still seems to happen. But it will offer an alternative interpretation task. So sometimes that fixes the problem as well. It's not a perfect task, but it's something that I can actually, work with and adapt myself. From there, what I might do is take the script that we can see up the top there, and I might enter into 11 labs, which looks a little bit like this. So 11 labs, for those of you who aren't familiar, will generate speech, text-to-speech, has a lot of different functions, which you can explore along with that. But one of the most basic ones is to give it some text, and it will add speech for you. And you can choose different voices. You can select ones which feel appropriate. But once you've generated it, a little tool that I really like is to click this enhance button here, which adds tone, emotion, sometimes little inflections like size and things like that, which is great to make it a bit more natural. So overall, what we come up with is a task plus a script.
If we had the kind of AI tools we have now when I was in secondary.
And then we can create our recording with 11 labs.
If we.
So just to end with a couple of recommendations, ask the tool for a second task, adapt the scripts and tasks as necessary. They, as I said, can sometimes be answered by reading alone. Scaffold by starting with a more general comprehension task, and try that enhance button with 11 labs and add your own prompts to adjust tone or accent. But really just playing with that custom GPT and seeing if it works for you. I'd love your feedback as well. So I've left my email at the bottom of my slides, and there's a link there for the custom GPT as well. So I think that's just about my time up. Sorry to have raced through that, but I hope that's useful for you guys. And if you want to get in touch, please do. I'd love that. So thank you very much.
Hi, Tim, thank you so much for that presentation. It's interesting because we had a session on custom GPTs on our community of practice, so I think that this ties in really well with that. What was your experience working with a custom GPT? Did you have to do a lot of fine-tuning? How has that been?
Yeah, it is quite a process, and sometimes I'll find that what I feel like has, I've been getting success with it, and then suddenly I'll try it again and things don't work, so I need to do some more tinkering. So it's probably something that this tool I need to continue to tinker with. But I'd really encourage people to sort of try out custom GPTs themselves. And also, just before I go, I was asked whether 11 Labs is free or paid. Both. There's a free version with limited credits and limited voices, and there's a paid version as well, which is much more expensive.
Thank you so much.